The title is The Topic. Today I'm responding to Anita's speech, What I Couldn't Say.
What I couldn't say is fuck you.
Then why did you just say it? There's nothing that has prevented or stopped you from saying what you feel. It is people like you who claim you are being silenced, yet you just challenge that claim by speaking your mind.
To the thousands of men who turned their misogyny into a game in which gendered slurs, death, and rape threats are weapons used to try and take down the big bad villain, which in this case is me.
Yet no one has taken you down. Nothing has stopped you. People have thrown everything at you from harassment to legitimate criticism. Given the fact you raised almost $500,000 last year and are now making higher profile appearances on the likes of Colbert and Nightline, I'd say you are gaining momentum. All you are doing is challenging the claim that this alleged wave of harassment has any impact on your ability to succeed, which brings into question why you spend almost half of your time talking about it rather than making your videos.
My life is not a game. I've been harassed and threatened every day for going on 3 years with no end in sight. And all because I dared to question the self-evident, obvious sexism running rampant in the games industry.
You were getting harassed before your Kickstarter.
How do I deal with trolls? It's an ongoing process. And the more popular I get, the more I get. Like 4chan has found me, and they're atrocious.
And when 4chan finds you, it does not matter if you are a man or a woman. They will troll you once they fixate on you.
And they purposely they subscribe to my videos so that they know when one comes out so that they can attack me.
And this is an issue that anyone has to deal with, because the bigger you get, the more you draw.
And the more popular I get, the more I get.
And you were receiving this type of harassment before your Kickstarter.
And I get the most horrendous comments you can imagine. Everything from you're hot, you're ugly, I want to do these explicit things to your body, to actual threats of sexual violence and threats of death even.
I've been saying for some time that you blamed gamers for harassment that you were already receiving, and you are proving my point in this speech.
And all because I dared to question the self-evident, obvious sexism running rampant in the games industry.
You were dealing with self-evident, rampant trolling before you seriously got into gaming.
And I get the most horrendous comments you can imagine.
And then blamed gaming culture.
I'd like to share with you a story about how I accidentally became the villain of a massively online game. There are a bunch of male gamers out there of misogyny on a grand scale. It's an overt display of angry misogyny on a massive scale.
The only thing toxic about gaming are people like you. People who were already toxic cesspools of harassment that brought their pre-existing problems into gaming culture and then blamed gamers in your TED Talk.
There are a bunch of male gamers out there, and while I was attacked by some teenage boys, I was also attacked by thousands of grown men. And this isn't entirely surprising considering the average age of the male gamer in the US is about 30. It's not just boys being boys. It's not just how the internet works.
You can't admit when you are wrong. You won't acknowledge legitimate criticism, and you bring your harassment with you wherever you go. Whenever you are interviewed, appear in a YouTube video, or interact with anyone, you bring your harassment and you dump it on them without any moral conscience for the suffering you put others through, and then you sit back and collect the money, even though you are already used to your level of harassment. You already know how to handle it.
How do I deal with trolls? I moderate all of my comments. I have people that support me and that I can vent to. I'm kind of used to it at this point. I just sort of ignore them as they come through. I block people left and right. YouTube has implemented a report harassment. Facebook has implemented a report harassment. So I urge everyone to moderate comments or turn them off. Just don't, if it's too much, just don't have them.
And anytime you talk about anything, you bring your baggage with you. You set everything up to bring it on yourself, then turn around and say it is gaming culture that is toxic and not yourself. If you ever quit and left the gaming scene, you would take all the baggage you brought with you.
Nothing about my experience is a game.
Everything about your experience is a game. It has been a carefully crafted game that was set up in a way so you will win. No one outside of Colbert challenged you serious on your work due to the harassment narrative.
What I couldn't say is I'm angry. When people who know what I go through on a daily basis meet me in person, they often react with some surprise, saying things like, I don't understand how you aren't more angry.
I understand why you aren't angry. It's because you are already used to your harassment.
I'm kind of used to it at this point.
You are used to it, it has not silenced you, and it has not stopped you. And instead of completing your videos that your backers are asking you to complete, you are spending your time on harassment when you could just ignore it as it comes through.
I just sort of ignore them as they come through. I just sort of ignore them as they come through. I just sort of ignore them as they come through.
This harassment is not stopping you from completing your videos. You are choosing not to complete your videos.
Because I'm just being me. I'm usually kind of charming and nice to people.
Then why not act that way in your current videos? I've watched some of your lectures and all of your YouTube videos that predate your Kickstarter. You were growing in popularity and making a name for yourself by being yourself. Why did you have to change?
But I respond saying that I am angry. In fact, I'm furious.
Why are you angry when you are used to it and you could just ignore it as it comes through?
I'm kind of used to it at this point. I just sort of ignore them as they come through.
I found myself that the more I get used to it, the less angry it makes me. One thing that makes me angry is how you dump your level of harassment on your supporters and have no issue with this. Just the other day, someone mentioned what came their way when you retweeted them and then you retweeted that. They said their harassment was about you, but it still became their problem, something they had to deal with. You make your fans suffer and then make them feel sorry for you.
I'm angry that we live in a society where online harassment is tolerated, accepted, and excused.
If it is tolerated, accepted, and excused, then why are there ways of dealing with it that predate your Kickstarter?
YouTube has implemented a report harassment. Facebook has implemented a report harassment.
And you know how to deal with harassment.
I moderate all of my comments. I block people left and right. So I urge everyone to moderate comments or turn them off. You know, just don't, if it's too much, just don't have them.
Meaning there is even less reason for you to run around complaining about the harassment you receive.
Where web services and law enforcement are not taking responsibility for the abuse that women suffer every day online.
Web services not taking responsibility? Then why did you say this on Twitter a couple of months ago? I've had to report a bunch of abuse this week. Impressed with Twitter @support's new streamlined reporting system. The fact Twitter is making improvements and you already know how to deal with harassment means that there is even less reason for you to run around talking about it. And you also mentioned law enforcement.
And law enforcement.
Have you ever demonstrated any example of a serious threat against you where law enforcement did not take it serious? Don't you get security when you go out to speak?
For Anita Sarkeesian, this is the new normal. Armed escorts at public events, tracking her every move.
How can you claim your harassment is not being taken serious when you get personal security intended to protect you?
I'm angry that I'm expected to accept online harassment as the price of being a woman with an opinion.
Harassment is not a woman-only issue. Men receive it as well. Before I deleted my last YouTube channel, one of your supporters came and started a bunch of crap in my comment section with my subscribers. I did not respond to that troll like my subscribers. Know why? I just ignored them as they came through.
I just sort of ignore them as they come through. I just sort of ignore them as they come through. I just sort of ignore them as they come through.
Which is how you deal with trolls. You moderate or ignore them. That supporter of yours wanted to imply I hated you. But they could not come right out and say it because I do not hate you. They continued to argue with people in that comment section till they got bored and left. And as far as your opinions go, you state things as facts with manipulative language, manipulation of science, and you cherry-pick examples of tweets and clips from games, and then refuse to acknowledge legitimate criticism or admit when you are wrong.
What I couldn't say is anything funny.
Why couldn't you? This speech is filled with implications of what you can't do or say, yet you have not demonstrated why you can't do or say these things. There is nothing preventing you from being funny. You used to be humorous in your older videos.
Okay, you get the point.
And you had no problem growing your brand before your Kickstarter. You had a successful set of Trope's videos before you got serious about video games. The only thing stopping you from being funny is yourself.
Most of my friends would describe me as a little bit snarky and pretty sarcastic, and you can occasionally glimpse this part of my personality in earlier criticism videos.
And there was nothing wrong with that. Your videos were being used as educational tools back then.
I get a lot of support from people who really like my videos, and they've even been used as educational tools in classrooms and screened at film festivals.
And back when you acted like yourself and let your personality shine through, you seemed like a happier person. One of the last times you spoke about harassment before your Kickstarter, you were smiling and happy.
How do I deal with trolls?
And now when you talk about harassment, you started off like this.
What I couldn't say is fuck you.
If you are miserable with life, it is your own fault for making your life this way. You have no one to blame but yourself.
But I almost never make jokes anymore on YouTube. Even though humor can be humanizing and I like using it, I don't do it because viewers often interpret humor and sarcasm as ignorance.
People have been calling you ignorant since you started your Tropes versus Women in Video Games series. It has nothing to do with humor, it has everything to do with yourself. There are plenty of game critics that use humor that are not considered ignorant, because most gamers know which critics are ignorant and which ones are not. This is what you are missing out on by not using humor.
Even though humor can be humanizing and I like using it,
you said it can make you seem more human and you like using it. Because you choose not to use it, you make yourself less human and enjoy what you are doing even less. You just admitted you are making yourself miserable, and it is not the harassment that did this to you. You did it to yourself.
especially if those viewers are male and the ones making the jokes happen to be female.
You have plenty of female critics that don't like you, and there are plenty of men that are hated on the internet. If people don't like your jokes, it isn't just men. And if they don't like your jokes, it is probably because they aren't that funny.
You would not believe how often jokes are taken as proof that I don't know what I'm talking about or that I'm not a real gamer.
I find it interesting that you said this, because going through your website, I found that you in fact do have an edited version of your Bayonetta review, and it is still up on your YouTube channel. Note, this is a slightly recut version of my Bayonetta advertising video from back in 2010. In the original video, I made a few jokes about the game that were misunderstood and caused a torrent of hate on YouTube. In this version, I've removed those jokes about the gameplay to better focus on the actual point of the video, which were the highly disturbing Tokyo subway ads. All my original points remain intact. So let's see what was edited out.
And of course she's lost her memories, and there's some evil demon horde, and there's a magical gem of the world, something, something, and so forth.
Something, something, so forth? That doesn't sound like jokes that were misunderstood. That sounds to me like someone reviewing a game without in-depth knowledge of the source material.
You would not believe how often jokes are taken as proof that I don't know what I'm talking about.
So far, it at least sounds like you don't care what you are talking about when it comes to Bayonetta.
Or that I'm not a real gamer.
If you were a real gamer when you talked about Bayonetta, you would have sounded more interested in the source material, which you just didn't seem to care about.
All of that is besides the point when it comes to this game.
Beside the point when it comes to this game?
Something, something, and so forth. But all of that is besides the point when it comes to this game.
So key elements of the game are beside the point when it comes to this game.
Or that I'm not a real gamer.
It does not matter how much you keep telling others that. It is a fact you had no interest in Bayonetta other than to attack it from the way the character is portrayed. A real gamer would judge a game on all its merits, not just the aspects they don't like.
First, the positive things about the game. She's a single mother. And, that's kind of it.
Despite all the positive things I've read about the game, and all the great things my brother, who loved that game, had to say about it, the only positive aspect you find is that she was a single mother.
Or that I'm not a real gamer.
And I'd also like to point out that Bayonetta was not a single mother.
You would not believe how often jokes are taken as proof that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Calling Bayonetta a single mother was one of two things. Either it was a bad joke that you edited out, or it was proof you didn't know what you were talking about and you want to hide that from the world.
So on to the negatives.
I'm leaving out the alleged negatives that were left in your recut video to focus on the ones you left out.
But it gets even better, because one of her most powerful weapons involves her stripping all her clothes off and turning her hair into an evil demon weapon fighting machine. Did you get that? The whole taking all her clothes off in order to use her hair as a weapon? Because clearly you can't use your hair to drag demons down to hell if you're fully clothed.
Bayonetta's clothes are her hair, and that is a core mechanic for her attack, to use her hair.
You would not believe how often jokes are taken as proof that I don't know what I'm talking about.
It's too bad you said you edited out jokes that were misunderstood or poorly worded. It just seems more and more like it is proof you were not a real gamer when you reviewed Bayonetta.
Or that I'm not a real gamer.
Let's continue with some more Bayonetta review.
Predictably, the internet is now infested with gamers' screen captures of various ways that they got Bayonetta naked.
It seems like you were attacking gamers back then for doing what they wanted. You can claim all you want it is toxic masculinity. I'll keep claiming it is you who is toxic, and it seems you invaded gaming culture to attack something that you personally did not like.
As if this pornographic, overly sexualized, animated representation isn't bad enough, the way that Bayonetta restores her power is by sucking on a lollipop.
You seem to have a vendetta against this game as well. Gaming is not just about you. Gaming culture is not just about you.
Because it's basically a choose-your-own patriarchal adventure porno fantasy.
You seem to think all forms of pop culture should conform to your standards and no one else's. I also noticed this new version was uploaded on June 4th, 2012, the same day your Kickstarter video was uploaded. It's like everything was carefully set up and crafted so no one could see your true colors. That Bayonetta review was something you had to alter so no one could see what kind of a game critic you really are. And despite the fact your Bayonetta review is still on your YouTube channel, I had to dig around your website to find it, almost as if you are trying to hide something.
You would not believe how often jokes are taken as proof that I don't know what I'm talking about or that I'm not a real gamer.
You claim you edited out jokes. It just seems to me like your Bayonetta review was something you altered and buried. If you did so much to distance yourself from that Bayonetta review to the point where you posted the edited version the day of your Kickstarter video, it probably means you are trying to hide something.
Or that I'm not a real gamer.
I will concede that right now you are a gamer, as you do seem to have some knowledge of games, and there is evidence to suggest you currently play games. But I think there is enough evidence to suggest that when you reviewed Bayonetta, you had not played it, or at the very least, did not care enough about the game to give it a fair assessment. If you were a real gamer back then, you didn't do a lot to convince me.
Even when those jokes rely on a deep knowledge of the source material.
After Anita admits she edited out what she calls jokes, and given the case I just laid out, would you say Anita has a deep knowledge of the source material when it came to Bayonetta?
Even when those jokes rely on a deep knowledge of the source material.
Based on your Bayonetta review, I'd say it is also possible you leave the humor out of your videos as not to look hateful or ignorant of the source material.
So as a result, I intentionally leave that more humorous side of my personality out of my current video presentations.
You didn't abandon your humor entirely, though. Each time an angry YouTuber with 250k plus fans decides to slander and strawman me, the harassment increases exponentially. It also seems you use humor to draw reactions out of people. It is a tool you use to generate harassment. You generate harassment so you can go around and talk about it. If you are receiving so much harassment, it is because you bring it on yourself. It is not gaming culture that is toxic, it is you.
I rarely feel comfortable speaking spontaneously in public spaces.
Why would you be careful of speaking spontaneously in public?
What I couldn't say is fuck you.
That is some pretty vulgar language. It is almost like you went off script for this speech. The odd thing, though, is how you pinned this tweet to your Twitter page, which means that whenever someone visits your Twitter, especially for a first-time visitor, they are greeted with this.
What I couldn't say is fuck you.
Being that you are the figurehead for an organization that is intended to educate people about games and that you have a young audience that frequents your media, that isn't a very professional greeting for anyone who visits your Twitter page. Now, what would happen if you had these outbursts in your videos?
Because it's basically a choose-your-own patriarchal adventure porno fantasy.
If you had outbursts like that in your videos, many people would not take you as serious. It appears that at some point you were crafted for the role, carefully altered and tweaked to be just right. You are like a piece of clay that someone took and molded for the part.
I'm intentional and careful about the media interviews I do.
And why would that be?
Give me some names. Name some names.
So in the work that I do, I look at hundreds of examples of video games,
So
and
can you think of three? Can you think of three?
The way I see it is with all the interviews you've ever had, Colbert was one of the few that was not afraid to challenge you solely on the merit of your work. Unlike most interviews, Colbert set aside the harassment narrative when it came to your work. He did talk about your harassment, but he also pressed you on your work. If you are not meticulous in who you do or do not let interview you, everyone would see real fast that you do not know your work as well as you want others to think you do.
I decline most invitations to be on podcasts or web shows.
She can hold her own in a debate. Anyone who can hold their own against Colbert is not to be underestimated. However, if Anita ever appeared in a podcast or a web show and someone like me showed up, Anita's arguments would get destroyed.
I carefully consider the wording of every tweet to make sure it is clear and can't be misconstrued.
You also carefully craft many of your tweets to stir up harassment, but worded in a way as not to show others what you are really up to. You can fool others, Anita, but you can't fool me. And when it comes to gaming, if you didn't carefully craft your tweets, it would look like your Bayonetta review all over again.
Over the last several years, I've become hypervigilant. My life, my words, and my actions are placed under a magnifying glass.
You do that to yourself. Your history indicates that if you go off script and act like yourself, that you would not be taken as serious. You should have stuck to television shows and movies. When you talked about that stuff, you sounded like you enjoyed life more, and you sounded like you knew the source material better.
Every day I see my words scrutinized, twisted, and distorted by thousands of men hell-bent on destroying and silencing me.
I have some of the most thorough, in-depth videos on Anita. She would never interact with a critic like me who is fairer to her than some of her other critics because she could not handle the pressure. As far as destroying and silencing you,
Hell-bent on destroying and silencing me.
You have not been destroyed. You have not been silenced. The fact you are standing there talking about harassment is proof you have not been silenced by your harassment. No amount of criticism, trolling, or harassment has silenced you.
What I couldn't say is I'm a human being.
I have only found that Anita is not allowed to say anything that goes off script. Other than harassment or video games, she doesn't talk about much else. If she couldn't say she's not a human being, it's because she is not allowed to act like one. Because acting like a human being that likes to tell jokes, be funny, or talk about things she likes outside of gaming is not on the script. It is not part of the game plan.
I don't get to publicly express sadness or rage or exhaustion or anxiety or depression. I can't say that sometimes the harassment really gets to me, or conversely, that the harassment has become so normal that sometimes I don't feel anything at all.
That's because the harassment does not bother you. You're kind of used to it, and you could just ignore it as it comes through.
I'm kind of used to it at this point. I just sort of ignore them as they come through.
The death threats come through on my social media, and it's just become a routine.
I'm kind of used to it at this point. I just sort of ignore them as they come through.
Screen cap, forward to the FBI, block, and move on.
Then why did you say that your harassment is not taken seriously by the authorities earlier?
Where web services and law enforcement are not taking responsibility for the abuse that women suffer every day online.
Has the FBI ever had a point where they did not take your harassment seriously?
And law enforcement are not taking responsibility for the abuse that women suffer every day online. Screen cap, forward to the FBI, block, and move on.
If they are not taking you seriously, then why do you forward it to the FBI?
Screen cap, forward to the FBI, block, and move on.
If you can just block and move on, and you can let the FBI deal with the serious threats, then why are your videos over 2 years overdue?
Screen cap, forward to the FBI, block, and move on.
You brought that all on yourself. You made it so others will hate you so you can draw out sympathy. And as far as your inability to live a normal life, if there is any truth to that, it is all your fault. You had a choice when you got into this. You could have stuck to the original plan and been done by now and lived a normal life, or you could set things up so people hate you and keep pushing the harassment narrative.
I don't get to express feelings of fear or how tiring it is to be constantly vigilant of my physical and digital surroundings. How I don't go to certain events because I don't feel safe. Or how I sit in the more secluded areas of coffee shops and restaurants so the least amount of people can recognize me or to see me. I don't show how embarrassed I am when I have to ask the person who recognized me in my local grocery store to please not mention the location where they met me.
You've done this for years now. If you don't have a normal life, it is because you chose a path that would not allow it.
Somehow we fooled ourselves into thinking that by expressing human emotions, it somehow means that the harassers have won.
If you expressed human emotions, it wouldn't mean that the harassment won. It would mean that humanity won.
This false belief is largely because in our society, women are not allowed to express feelings without being characterized as hysterical, erratic, bitchy, highly emotional, or overly sensitive.
Because it's basically a choose-your-own patriarchal adventure porno fantasy.
If people are calling you things like that, it is not because you are a woman, it is because you act that way. You are too stubborn to listen to what people tell you and have decided you would rather live in an ideological world where everyone on the planet is wrong but you.
Our expressions of insecurity, doubt, anger, or sadness are all policed and often used against us.
The only thing that I've used against you are facts, logical thinking, and your own words. If you are insecure of my scrutiny, it is because you know I'm right and won't admit it.
But by denying ourselves the space to feel and to share those feelings, we're just perpetuating this notion that we should all suffer alone.
The only reason others suffer is because you bring it on them. You are so toxic, no one can come near you without getting infected.
That we should all just toughen up and grow thicker skin.
You already have thick skin.
I'm kind of used to it at this point. I just sort of ignore them as they come through.
The problem is you are used to this level of harassment and have had years of experience to deal with it. But then you dump it on unsuspecting bystanders and then train them to feel sorry for you.
Which we shouldn't have to do.
We should not have to grow thicker skin. The only one that needs thicker skin are toxic people like you. You just found a way to dump harassment on anyone who associates with you, people who have not had years of experience to develop thick skin.
What I couldn't say is, I don't even want to be saying any of this. Largely because I still feel fear that expressing human emotions publicly will make me seem insecure.
If you express human emotions, it would derail the game plan. But I will say this. You might actually be happier if you acted like a human being, and you might enjoy life more doing what you want to do and acting how you want to act.
The truth is that women who persevere and retain some measure of their humanity are not expressing weakness, they're demonstrating courage.
You ignore legitimate criticism. You lack the ability to admit when you are wrong, and you set up a scenario where you rarely deal with scrutiny in a public setting, and you've trained legions of people to focus on your harassment instead of your work. There is nothing courageous about you. You are nothing but a coward.
In all the different, messy, honest ways that we respond to harassment, we actually demonstrate how much humanity we all still have in the face of such cruelty and injustice.
What you have done to the gaming industry and its culture is cruel and unjust. You are training people to believe that gaming culture is reflective of a handful of people within it. You are training people to believe that there is widespread sexism in games. You are training people to believe the experience of one pop culture critic reflects the treatment of all women in gaming. And you are training people to believe there is widespread misogyny and rampant sexism in an industry where these are not big picture or systemic issues. It is not gaming that is the issue. It is you.